we have, I think we're over 30 now, something like that. Just like, people talking for like about 20 minutes, like, what their cancer was, what their diagnosis was, talking about what they specifically did, because everyone's a little different. And I think it's really great too, because there's all different kinds of cancer that are now up there. So you might be able to even find somebody who has the kind of cancer that you have and hear what they did. I mean, this is all not medical advice, but I mean, it just helps you to hear somebody who's in the same position as you, right?
You need both. You need the hard science. You need the Thomas Seyfrieds and you need the Travis Christoffersons to do the research and put that out there. But you also need the Martha Tettenborns. You need to hear what it was like to drive in Ottawa in the middle of winter to go get your treatments done and to do those 72-hour fasting protocols. And that's part of the story. And that's what makes all of this so powerful. I want to go back to something you guys said about the fasting in particular. Something that Dr. Seyfried hammers home all the time, and I've heard him say it the same thing on your show, the 5-minute preview that you guys have already released, is that you need to understand the biology of cancer. Once you understand the biology of cancer, now you can make really good informed decisions about how you're going to treat it. So as we've been looking at cancer as this genetic disease, we've kind of been following the genes and trying to make sense out of what ended up being this gobbledygook of all kinds of, I don't know, letters and numbers and all kinds of stuff that don't really lead us anywhere. But by understanding the biology of cancer, you mentioned fasting is something that you could do, which is the first thing that I would do too. If you gave me a diagnosis of cancer today, I would go on a 7-day water fast and I would keep that in my life for the rest of my life. So can you talk about why fasting is so powerful and such a powerful tool to be used alongside a ketogenic diet?
Yeah, I'm gonna take this one. I'm kind of gotten into the science a lot as we've been going through this process. Quickly to just to talk about the genetics that you mentioned. It's like they did this cancer genome atlas and they thought that they would figure out like, okay, well, this mutation causes this cancer and this mutation causes this cancer. And instead what they found is that cancer tumors have hundreds of mutations. The same type of cancer can have, 50 mutations in one person and 50 different mutations in another person. So this idea that you have a mutation and that's what causes a cancer, it's not really working out the way that scientists thought it would. So that's kind of why we're like, maybe we need, like Seyfried, let's take a step back, maybe look at a different way of how cancer forms. So to get into the fasting in particular, Walter Longo with a V, Walter Longo, did some really good research on fasting, and what he sort of found was that when you fast, your normal cells will sort of go into like a slightly hibernative type state. They're just, they can tell there's no nutrients out there. They're kind of like, we got to like slow everything down. They actually start killing off the like less healthy, normal cells. Cancer cells do not do this. Cancer cells are ravenous for glucose all the time, even if you're in ketosis. So what ends up happening is that the effectiveness of any kind of conventional therapy that you do while you're on fasting ends up being much more effective. And that's what we think happened with Maggie's like second version of the radiotherapy. So what ends up happening is that your normal cells don't get affected as much, so that you don't feel as bad, and your cancer cells are actually even more exposed. The therapy ends up being usually either chemotherapy or radiation, and ends up being more effective when you've fasted for a few days before you go in. So how about you talk about like just a longer term fast, I guess.
Yeah, and so it's incredibly effective to help potentiate conventional therapies like chemo and radiation. But in some cases where those are not options, Sarona Ramaka, a case study survivor from a Frontiers in Cancer magazine, she didn't have those options, so she just went with keto and fasting. Right. So she fasts 5 to 7 days every month, and her terminal cancer, which was supposed to kill her within 6 months, she's now 4.5 years cancer free.
She had a 17 centimeter tumor in her chest.
And if you see this girl, which you can on our YouTube, she's tiny.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she used no conventional, this is just one person, but she just did keto and fasting because she was pregnant. She didn't want to put that. She wanted to try and have the baby, and so that's how it came. That's how it originally worked out. And yeah.
It was just palliative. They wouldn't. There was no option for chemotherapy.
Yeah. It would have only been palliative chemotherapy, but still, she was pregnant at the time. So
wow.
Yeah. But yeah, a
That's
17
incredible.
centimeter tumor, just like that's bigger than a grapefruit, right? Yeah.
That's crazy. Wow. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting. That's again, in that situation, you couldn't use traditional treatments, and it is just one situation, right? It's just one anecdote. But at this point, you've got so many people with so many different anecdotes. The evidence is just so strong that at the very least, like you guys said, this can be an adjunct. This doesn't have to be everything that you do, but you can use this to help their traditional treatments.
Yeah.
This is something that we haven't talked about previously, but I'm thinking about GBM, glioblastoma multiforme, which we all know has terrible survival rate. You're talking a year, maybe 2 if you're lucky, they catch it early, all of that. And I'm thinking of 2 cancer survivors who are featured in our film. I feel very close to both of them. One is Pablo Kelly. Seyfried actually wrote a study on him recently. He's now on 8 years without conventional treatment. He turned down chemo and radiation, but his work with keto was enough to get his tumor operable. So he was able to have an operation, which wasn't a possibility for him before. And then I have a very close friend, Ian. I'm not sure if we should use his last name right now, but he also had GBM. He's surviving 5 years. He's amazing. His wife is incredibly supportive, great cook. He had conventional treatment early on, and he's wonderful. He's doing well, but like me, he's disabled by his aphasia with issues from the brain caused by his radiation treatment. And his is a little bit more significant than mine even. And I would never, ever tell somebody not to take their conventional treatment, but it's something worth being aware of the
just that there are people that have done it, I
results.
suppose. Yeah. I think that you're going to just sort of find that there's sort of eventually there's sort of a happy medium here, right? Where that idea of like you can fast and then maybe have since the drugs are more effective, you could have less chemo or less radiation, right? Like you don't have to, there's this idea right now of the maximum tolerable dose, right? Like what's the maximum we can give to a patient and not kill them basically, right? And it's like, I think that could be rethought, reassessed. So, and one other thing I was just going to add with respect to these like glioblastomas and aggressive cancers, basically late stage cancers, there's a lot of people that are turning to the metabolic therapies because they have no alternative out there for conventional treatment, right? If you're a glioblastoma patient, basically your doctor's like, sorry, that's your diagnosis, like we don't have anything for you, right? So
Pray.
the fact
Go
that
home and pray.
yeah, and there's a lot of late stage cancers that people are going to their doctor and it's like, sorry, like we caught it too late. Your chances are super tiny.
Get your affairs in order.
And these are people, there's a lot of these people actually that we've spoken to. We have a ton of stage 4 cancer people that we've spoken to. And that's when they're like, well, that's not good enough. I'm going to keep looking for something else on my own. And here they are, 4, 5, 10. We talked to people that are actually NATIA winners 30 years out from a stage 4 cancer diagnosis. Jane McClellan, what is she, like 25 years out? Yeah. I mean, just there are people that have really used this therapy and have extended their life, a ton.
And I think the big takeaway from that too is we're not trying to cure cancer. Like no diet's going to cure cancer, but if it can make it manageable and something that you live with for the next 50, 60 years, I have no problem with that.
Yeah.